Good morning, everybody. We're back to Saturday morning and having this wonderful opportunity to see everybody again. I understand that last week, this hasn't left my mind. Last week and many weeks before, I mentioned that it's very possible that on Lunar 16th, that Master was going to come out and give the morning Dharma talk. Now, as Lunar 16 came and gone, we realized that that hasn't happened. And it's partly because of the epidemic. It's partly because of many different reasons. But whatever it is, I think just like what we have just prayed earlier, that we should still be very sincere and let us continue this journey. And I'm sure in time we will get to the Dharma talk that we all have been waiting for. But before that, I think it is also very, very important to stay very close to what Master has been talking about. So I have put together a very specific topic for today that I wanted to share. But before we get to today's topic, let us review what we talked about last week. So last week we talked about working together to mitigate the epidemic. We talked about the teachers and the benevolent friends. We talked about the hardest part is probably to persevere. So these are the things that we talked about last week. And I try to tie it in with chapter 20 of the Lotus Sutra. So we spoke of working together to mitigate the epidemic. And on January 31st, last month already, see, the time just flew by. In just a blink of an eye, it went from 2019 to 2020. And then all of a sudden, the Lunar New Year was already over. And it has already been over for almost 3 weeks already. Okay, so it's very, very quickly. Time just flew by. So Master was talking about last month about the collective karma of killing. And because we as human beings and humankind, we do not respect and love our nature. And therefore, this karma is sure to come back and hit us. And so all the lives that we have killed, all these 200 million lives each day, can you imagine all the lives lost and all the spirits lost and killed and the sorrow and the agony and all the hatred? So Master continues to talk about the collective karma that is coming, combined together with all this hatred. And so last week we talked about, have we seen this hatred, agony before? So deep in the minds and memory of everybody, of all these animals. Have we seen this before? And last week we talked about, yes, we have. And we have seen that similar stories from the Middle East, the refugees running out of the civil war in Syria. So it lead into what the main topic was, the teachers, right? Because from last year, November, the last day of the morning talk, live morning talk that Master gave us was talking about the never sliding Bodhisattva as the teacher, as the benevolent friends to guide us, to reach the vision of wisdom, to witness the truth, and to make great vows, to have great compassion. That's what the teachers are telling us to do. So following that line, if we go back to the idea of the refugees, Master talked about that they have this hatred in them, and it is very important to plant the seeds of love and compassion and to remove the seeds of hatred. Okay, so how do you do that? You do that by having a good teacher. You do that by having a good friend. And you have a good teacher and a good friend when you're in here in Tzu Chi. You have a lot of Dharma family, and you have the teachers, masters to help us. So never sliding Bodhisattva was that. He understood the deeper meanings of Buddha's teaching. So even in the very worst conditions, he continued to adhere to these teachings. And it's very simple. And how do you do that? How do you persevere? So we shared that last week, that first, you need to have faith and confidence in the teachings. And then you need to be, you need to have faith to accept it. Open your minds and heart to accept it by having faith and confidence. Otherwise, it will be impossible to practice it. Second of all, you have to seize every opportunity. Even in the worst of the conditions, you will still need to remember that part of what we do here is to help the suffering and at the same time forge this very good affinity and reach out to people. As long as you are willing to reach out, there's always an opportunity that's waiting for you. And not only that, you have to be self-driven, motivated, and wherever there is suffering, the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas will seek them out, okay? So this week, this is what we're gonna talk about. What are we gonna talk about? Yes, the great enlightened one of the universe. Yes, this is the one. Why now? Why talk about this? And why not just call this Buddha? Why do we call the great enlightened one of the universe? And this is perhaps the most misunderstood part in Tzu Chi, other than the uniform cost $1 million, okay? Other than that part, the rumors, other than that, this is probably the most misunderstood part of Tzu Chi. And we just had it for the past week, the whole week. There were 4 or 5 instances where Master gave a talk about this. And in such a short time, she spoke many ideas, concepts that I wanted to make clear, that I thought about, that I wanted to make clear to everybody. Just what exactly is this? And I tied in with the Sutra verses that I found to be so enlightening, because I didn't understand what it meant before, but now it makes sense. Okay, so first, let us talk about the great enlightened one of the universe, 宇宙大觉者. This is the one thing that everybody, you know, the ones that we bow to, the ones that we see all the time, and the ones that when other people see and don't understand, they begin to attack and they begin to speak ill of this and why. So let us get into what this is. So first, the name. Why not just call him the Buddha? Why do we call him the great enlightened one of the universe? Master started from the beginning, okay? She didn't just start by talking about the statue itself. A Master took us back. Master took us back to the beginning. So what was it? Master said, the Buddha, did the Buddha gave himself the title Buddha? Okay, she began by asking the question, was such Buddha to be positioned in the temple so that you could have people come and bow and pray to? Plus, if we pray to the Buddha, do we get this blessing? And the answer is no to all these questions. Now, I wanted to bring the first question. Did the Buddha give himself the title Buddha? Now, if you go back to the story, you know, that's what the Buddha said. I'm the enlightened one. And the enlightened one, in the original term, it's actually named Buddha, okay? So did he give himself the title Buddha? The reason why this question was asked, we're gonna talk about it later, okay? So this is what Master asked. And the answer is no, okay? So Master said, Buddha was a man born in this world. The only thing that was different was that he thought differently from others. He always contemplated the birth, aging, illness, and death of life. He contemplated these truths and principles. He was full of wisdom, always seeking the answers of life itself. Why is there life? Where did life originate? And Master went on to say, these are the wise people. The very wise ones always contemplate these questions in life. And as he sees everyone in the palace was growing old, he began to question this aging process. Why does everybody age? And why does everybody get sick? And why does everybody eventually die? So that's what he does. So Master began not with the statue, not with the enlightened one of the great enlightened one of the universe, but she began by questioning, It's the Buddha self-title. If I call myself Buddha, would you recognize me as the Buddha? Probably not. So he is not the Buddha just because he called himself the Buddha, but what made him the Buddha? And is this Buddha the Buddha because we all pray to him and bow to him? If I were to stand on the table and tell everybody to bow to me, would you do that? No. So it's the same thing. The Buddha, even though it was self-proclaimed to be, everybody felt the same way. It's not just who you say yourself as, but everybody also agree and believe so. And it's not that you ask people to pray and bow to you, because Buddha never tell anyone that you should bow to me. No, but everybody just felt they want to bow. So is the Buddha as the giver of the blessings? And this all leads into the question that we've been talking about, I think last week and the weeks before. What is the value of our lives? What is the value of this? For example, this is a mask that we put on our face, okay? So in right now, the epidemic, and I shared this before, how valuable is this mask? 2 months ago, 3 months ago, it's probably dirt cheap. You can get it anywhere. 3 months later, you can't get it anywhere, and this becomes a very rare commodity. So the mask itself didn't change. It didn't change its function. It didn't all of a sudden becomes padded with gold, lined with silver. No, it didn't happen. It's the same thing, but the values are different. So the same thing. If I say I'm the Buddha, would you feel the same way? If everybody say I'm the Buddha, would that make me the Buddha? And that's the value. Just like, why do we do things that we do? Helping people. If no one is there to applaud, if no one is there to say, you did a good job, would you still do it? Would there still be value in helping people? So this idea is the Buddha or the name is not given by themselves, by everyone. No, it was there already. The value of the Buddha, the name of the Buddha was already in that person, in all of us. But because that Buddha nature in us already appeared, that is why I can say I'm the Buddha, everybody can recognize me as the Buddha, and I become the Buddha. So it's very different. So this is something that I wanted to bring out. Okay, so next. Buddha was a man born in this world just like any other man. So the only thing different was he thought differently by contemplating the principles in life. But these are the things that he both experienced and the things that he couldn't experience. For example, he experienced all the richness of the palace, but he couldn't experience the lacking, the world of lacking, or the world of poverty. But he thought about it. And I think that's very, very important. First of all, Buddha was definitely a man. Historically, there was a man, there was a prince that was in this country, this territory. And he thought of this idea and he contemplated. So isn't that what Master always taught us to do? Always to think and contemplate. And not just to see around you, but to be aware of the things that we might otherwise not be aware to. So a wise person like the Buddha can be awakened and can be enlightened to see the things that is not around, that is not there for him to see. On the other hand, because we are so not wise, even when the things are right in front of us, we do not see it. But Master brought that to us. So make us see it and teach us to see the things that we don't see. And that is the value, right? That is what Master taught us to do, is that some wise one could see the things that aren't there. But if we're not so wise, let us follow what the wise one did, which was to bring the things so that we can see. So that was the beginning. This is just the beginning, to talk about the great enlightened ones, to start from the Buddha. Because the question was, why don't we just call him the Buddha? Why do we have to have another name? So we began at the origin. He was a man on this world, and he just thought differently, contemplated about the principles. Okay, so next, let's continue. So still, Buddha was enlightened. Somehow, at the moment of awakening and enlightened, his inner mind was merged with the entire world. It was as if his consciousness opened up and merged with the world to become one with the world. What does that mean? We'll get into that later. So enlightened, opened up, and merged with the world and become one. So all the objects, all the matters, all the principles, the world, everything there that exists in the world, the Buddha knew and comprehended and understood all of them. And he spoke of such principles. So the Buddha, the enlightened one, understood and preached these principles. And as the Buddha was enlightened, he had elevated and risen above others on this earth. And what does that mean? That did he really levitate? Did he really become higher and taller? No, he didn't. All there was his mind was greater. All that there was he now merged with the world. So even though he preached his teachings on this earth, even though he walked this earth, but his wisdom and the enlightened mind, the complete wisdom, had merged with the universe. So even though he is still here on earth, even though he preached and taught to the people, and even though he looked like us, but his mind and his spirit and his wisdom had already merged with the universe. Such complete wisdom, also called the perfect reflecting wisdom, is pure and clear. And such tranquil and clear state is Buddha's inner state. Okay, so this is something that from Buddha was a man thinking about the principles in life, to go a little bit deeper about that state of mind. After contemplating and after thinking about all these principles, thinking about all these things, what was the inside? And this is called the perfect reflecting wisdom, or the complete wisdom that knows everything. Why did he know everything? Because his mind and his consciousness had already merged with the universe. How is that possible? I don't know, because I haven't gotten there. Okay, but that's the inner mind, according to Master. That was the state. Okay, so step by step, Master's taking us from the Buddha and slowly reaching to where she wants to guide us. Okay, so let's contemplate. Let's contemplate. So Master talked about the inner mind merged with the world, become one with the universe. What does that mean? There is a verse that's called 心包太虚量周杀戒. That means your mind, your state of mind is so vast that you could even encompass and include the entire emptiness, the entire void, the entire universe. And you can completely, it's so big that it encompasses the entire everything. Okay, so how does that happen? How does that work? You know, you always get back to what Master talked about. You know, Master once talked about being able to hear the breathing sound of the earth. She said once that if you are still in the morning, like in the morning after the chanting, there was a time when everybody just meditate and sat still. If you sat still there, Master once taught that you could hear the sound of earth breathing. So that was our ear, right? And Master also said that we should walk gently. Remember, 走路要轻，怕地会痛. So it's not just, how would you know that the earth will felt pain unless you are already one with earth? How would you know that the lung of the earth is feel stuffed, couldn't breathe, if you aren't already one with earth? And just recently, Master was talking about every time there was a disaster on Earth, she would feel there would be some illness around with her body also. That's what happened when you are thinking about the Earth so much that you become one with the Earth. So this is what we always talk about, coexist with the Earth, right? So when we say the word 与地球共生习, coexist with the Earth, you're thinking about living on Earth, just living, coexist together. But in Master's mind, it's not just living together with the Earth, like you're living together with your mom and dad. No, it's coexist with them, meaning one and the same. 共生习 doesn't just mean sharing the same space. It's sharing the same mentality, sharing the same feelings, and sharing the same everything. So it goes beyond just living in the same space, like, oh, me and my wife, or me and my husband, me and my children, we live, coexist. No, but we as one, living as one, okay? And that's what Master's talking about. That's why she talked of feeling the pain of the Earth, feeling and equating the fire, equating the fire that we see on planet Earth with the rising of the temperature, the fever. That is called one and the same, not just you're having your fever, I'm having my fever. No, when you're having fever, I'm having fever. When you're hurt, I'm hurt. Isn't that what Master is talking about? 无缘大慈，同体大悲. That's exactly what Master is talking about. Okay, so that's what coexists with the Earth. Okay, so it's not just coexist with all sentient beings, living ones, but also non-living. But Master coexists with them, so you can feel as if they're living, like the Earth. To us, Earth is not living, but it lives, and we coexist with it together, merge as one. So such state of perfect reflecting wisdom, is pure and clear. And what does that mean? It means that there's no self. There's no affliction such as greed, anger, or ignorance, or any of that, because there's no self, right? You see a greater self, not just a lesser self. You no longer just see this very clear. The state of perfect reflecting wisdom is pure, meaning that it's not talking about me. It's not talking about myself. It's talking about the greater self. No longer are we talking about my pain, my need, my feelings. It's talking about the greater me, greater my feeling, greater world, the entire universe. It's talking about the greater me, the greater self. So that's how you felt. You don't just feel my family, my friend, me. You feel about the greater self, the earth, the universe, all sentient beings, everything. Okay, so that is pure and clear and so thorough with everything. Okay, that is the greater self. Okay, so slowly we are supposed and slowly seeing the picture forming. Okay, slowly seeing the picture forming. So why now? Why now? Why now talking about this? Why spend 4 different times talking to us about the great enlightened one of the universe? So on 11, Master talked about this. The true principles, the teachings, still require a form to transmit. Without such form, principles can't be derived. So we need to learn the principles in Dharma, but we also need such form. You need to have an object, a representation of this principle. The principles are everywhere, but you can't see them. You can only feel them. You can't, there's nothing. So even, for example, like the sound, you can't see the sound, but we make it into waves, okay? Because we need to see it, visualize it. Or light, we can't see light, so we make it into spectrums of these waves. Why? Because we need to visualize it. Same thing, principles are all around us, but without the form, the principles cannot be derived. So for us in Tzu Chi, It's the same thing. What we want isn't just a painting or a statue made of gold or silver. What we want isn't a painting or a statue that sat there for followers to come and pray and bow to and to hold Dharma ceremony. That's not what we want. So for more than 2 decades, because that's the time that it took to come out with this thing, Master said she knew that we need a form, a representation of the Buddha, but not like the ones from the past. Okay, so this is the journey that Master was going through. Who was the Buddha? What did he know? What was he awakened to? What was the enlightened truth that he was awakened to? And what do we need? We need these truths and the principles, but we need a form. But the form should be representing the Buddha, but not like the ones from the past. Well, what do we need? So Master said, what I need was a form to reflect Buddha's inner mind, a representation of the inner mind of the Buddha. So what we talked about, remember the universe, remember merging one with the universe, that's what needs to be represented. And we need to represent the inner mind of the Buddha, not just the form of the Buddha, but reflecting that inner mind. So Master said, the mind itself is vast and void and empty. So how do you represent that? And not only that, out of all the void and emptiness, you need to have a form, a physical form, a representation of our belief, merging with one with the earth, merging with virtue. So that's what we need. So this is the journey of Master thinking, what was the enlightened one, our teacher? And then slowly, what did he know? What did he understand? And then until, what do we need to understand this? How do we get there? And how do I represent that? So finally, the design was to have the earth suspended in the vast void, the void of the universe, and the earth suspended. Because so far, we only know of this planet to have life. So far, all the evidences point to there may be other life forms, but we haven't found them. So far, this earth is the only one that we know to have life. Not only that, the Buddha was born here. And on this very planet, on this very world, he went through the journey to be enlightened and awakened to all these principles. So that's why the earth was very important. But it's part of the void, because it's not just the earth, but the entire universe, and the void was all inside his heart. So remember, he merged with the earth, merged with the universe. So he felt the pain of the earth. He understood the teachings and the principles of the earth. That's why earth was important. And this was also the world that he was born. So that was important. So Buddha's inner mind and spirituality had already surpassed this world. That is why the Buddha, the great enlightened one, wasn't part of the earth, but he became bigger outside of the earth, because surpassed this world, not just like any one of us on this world, but surpassed this world. And why was he so big? Because it's the greater self. No longer are we talking about the small individual, my family, my life, my feelings, my understanding. It's talking about the greater feelings, understandings, and teachings and the principles of the universe. That's why it's big compared to the world. So every object, everything you see in this design had a reason, had a very good rationale behind why Master made it. So Master said, he and the vast void of the universe had already merged as one. So the background was universe, but you still need a form. So you need to have a form of a person, of a monk, of a monastic representing, okay? So with such wisdom and spirituality, Buddha still needed the virtue to be able to effectively guide and preach to the people. So the look and feel need to have the representation of the virtue. Otherwise, you can have all the wisdom, but people would not listen. People would not follow you. You need to teach them effectively by having this virtue, okay? So such representation, how do you design this? So if you follow all this process and you're looking at the end product, you would see why it became that way. Okay. So Master said, form and emptiness. At first, it was a form of Buddha. And then Master was talking about the inner self, the inner mind was void and empty. And now back to having a design. So Master said, I wanted such vast void with the Buddha, the enlightened one, talking to the world, caring for the world, extending his hands to caress and heal the earth, bringing truth and principles to humanity. That's where I began to design for such representation. So now if you look at what we have and you see all the journey of where Master came from, you can understand why it was designed this way. Must look like a real person. Okay, so started with a man of this earth, a man of this world. Not only that, what did he learn? He contemplated about the process of life. He contemplated about principles. And then when he was awakened, his mind was merged with the universe, with the earth, and he felt the earth. He became the one with the universe. And not only that, coexisted with the earth. And then you need a form to teach these principles. How do you do that? By carrying, talking to the earth, bringing principles to the earth. That's where the design began. Okay, so let's think about all these. This is difficult, right? The form and void. Always talk about Kong, Yo. What? All these very difficult things, right? So Master said, principles alone isn't enough. You need the matters of life. You need real stories to represent and to make clear the teachings. These are the things that need to merge together to make sense of it. That's why Master always talk about what's happening in the world, not just talking about what's teaching in the Sutra. The Sutra are all principles written in words, but you need stories. You need actual things happening to you and I to make it matter, to make it so that we understand it, okay? So this is where I felt that was so deeply intertwined, okay? So in the Sutra of Infinite Meanings, in chapter 1, Virtues, there are these verses that I felt were very important. So these verses were, before these verses, there were verses of praises by the disciples, praising the very, very good features, physical features of the Buddha. There are 32 of them, okay? So of these physical marks, there are 32 and 80 excellent characteristics which seem to be seen. This is very important. Seem to be seen. It looks like you can see it, okay? These 32 characters that seem to be seen, but in truth, there is no appearance nor any form, as all appearances are perceived by the eye. Okay, so what does that mean? It seems like you can see it, but in truth, there is no appearance, there is no any form, because only thing that you see are what you saw by the eye. Okay, let us continue. While his appearance is of non-appearance. This is very, what do you mean? His appearance is non-appearance. The whole point is he manifests the appearance of a body. And this is the same physical appearance as sentient beings, which allows sentient beings to happily pay respect and sincerely express their utmost reverence. What does that mean? It means the same journey that we just talked about, right? The Buddha himself, it's not the statue in gold or silver. It's not a painting that we see in the temples. What we need to represent, it's the spirituality, it's the teachings. That's what we need to represent, but not just the statue. So you start with the statue, and then you know, but we need to show the teachings, but the teachings are void. So how do you do this? You need to come up with another form. So what you see and what you understand, and then eventually what you design, is a completely different one, because you realize you need to manifest something that represents the teaching, represents the spirituality. Okay, so that's something that I found is very important, and that's, I put the two together. That the Sutra talks about form and appearance, and Master talks about the form and appearance, something that need to bring out the joy in us, something that need to bring out the destination of our cultivation, something that need to point out that this is the direction of our cultivation. Okay, so this is the journey of Master when she was thinking about designing for a statue of form for us. And I just share that with all of you. And I'm sure there's so much more deeper than this, but I think we should all contemplate further to think about who made him the Buddha. Was it himself, stood on the table and called out to everybody, I am the Buddha and you must all trust and believe me? Would that make him the Buddha? Or would everybody that said, you are the Buddha, would that make him the Buddha? What made him the Buddha? What was it? And how is it that we can represent something that has no form? And so that's what Master walked with us through the journey to make us think clearly what all this is. So even though it was the most misunderstood part of Tzu Chi paradigm, it is also a very important part. And I hope today we get a better understanding of it. So that's my sharing for today. Thank you. And we'll open up to the other centers for the sharing. Thank you.
Karan Brother Chiu for such wonderful sharing. Greetings from Sri Dhammasara. Today we have with us Brother Chin. He'll be the sharer for today. Brother Chin is very much sought after consultant. He in fact sits on board for many listed companies. I didn't know until yesterday when I was searching for Brother Chin, but he's always very humble. To us, he's known as Brother Chin. He's someone early on called him Professor. Okay, so he's very learned, very humble person. Let us, and then he and his home sister, Sister Supin, later we will hear her sharing as well. Both of them were certified last year. Let us hear their journey, their spiritual journey on this path.
Okay, while we're still trying to put up the slides, perhaps maybe I will just start off by talking about my affinity, or rather the affinity that I have on the Buddhist path. So let me first of all talk about the affinity. Now, obviously in my early years, I had affinity in Buddhism, and that's largely because my parents' influence, especially from my mother. And also when I talk about Buddhism, it's very, as you can understand, in those early years, and until so far as even this period of time, we always associate in Buddhism, especially in the Mahayana practice, is with Kuan Yin. And why Kuan Yin? Because there's a lot of compassion on Kuan Yin, and that's what people can relate to very easily to the Buddhist path. Now, the strange thing is, I actually was educated in a Catholic school, but somehow that quite did not shake my faith or my affinity. And that was my early years on my affinity with Buddhism. Now, as I was growing up, when I was in school, during my formative years, I was involved in various activities, and I thought I will go back a little bit part of it, so how it can relate to Tzu Chi. I was involved in feeding the poor students during school break, collecting public donation in the streets in the hot sun. I do that every year. Also I do a lot of duties to help the sick and the injured. The most memorable part of it was the disaster relief that I had to do. I was brought up in evil. Some of you who are as old as I am, you may recall there was a huge disaster that's happened during one rainy day, and there was a little squatter village. They were under a lake cave and limestone area. Now the whole limestone hill got chipped off and fell onto the village. The next morning, and it was done early in the morning. When I went to school, I was called on duty to go to this disaster area. Now this has just happened, so I was rushed there, and my duty was actually to carry the injured or even dead bodies. And that was my first disaster relief that I had. Now, and the turning point actually came when I was just turned 17, and I was going to go to UK to do my studies. During that time, obviously, I needed to learn a bit more about Buddhism, and actually, I didn't want to become a worshipper, and I wanted to become a seeker, and seek to understand the path of Buddhism. But I learn a little bit from whoever that I can learn from. Then when I moved over to the UK, I was there for 7 years. I continued to do those various activities that I was doing. So I collected one of those guys who sent by the tube station, collecting money for the blind. I visited spastics' home. So all these activities that I experienced in my early years, obviously when I started with Tzu Chi in volunteerism, fitting quite nicely, just that I haven't done it for many years after I came back from the UK. On Tzu Chi, I have been approached in the very, very early years to join Tzu Chi, just that I never did join Tzu Chi because everything was in Mandarin. Honestly, I don't know anything about Mandarin, and so I had a communication language barrier when it comes to joining Tzu Chi, so I never did. And it's only about 2.5 years, 3 years ago that I was told that there is an English-speaking group. That's why I joined the path. Now, how this encounter about 3 years ago came about. I was asked to join a entrepreneur group or a visit to the boat in Hualien. That was in 2017. But going there, it was an experience. But I was very fortunate that halfway through the class, Sister Kathleen pulled me up and said, "We have an opportunity to see the master." So asked me to come along. So obviously I went together with my home sister, and since we were given the opportunity to actually speak to the master and ask questions, so I asked this question, and this question that I asked was meant as a general question for everyone in Tzu Chi. And my question was, how does the Dharma of the heart open up to the wisdom of the mind? I can't speak Mandarin. I was being translated. I was concerned whether my question was translated properly, and I asked the interpreter. I repeated my question again. I say, how does the Dharma of the heart open up the wisdom of the mind? The reason why I asked the interpreter again was because when the master directed answer to me, he didn't quite answer me the question, but he answered about me personally. And this is what the master said. And this, I don't know very little Mandarin. I remember some of the words that the master said, and she repeated it. He said, 智慧你有了，但是你很忙，你要定你的心。So you say wisdom you already have. It's just that you're very busy. I say still your heart. Now the strange thing is, the reason why I brought this encounter is because 2-3 weeks before that, in my morning sadhana is a contemplation that I do every morning. And I requested in my quiet way to a question as to how am I progressing in my practice. So, and I said to myself quietly, I will not ask this question to anybody, but one day a high spiritual master will answer me. So that was the experience that I had on that day, sometime March. 2017. So, and the message is very clear. He said that, well, maybe you should, what the master is trying to tell me is maybe you should take up the path in Tzu Chi. So that began my training, 2 years training, my Jiangxi and Peixin, which I completed last year. So here I am as a commissioner. And the master, my Dharma name given by Master Panye, or I honestly don't know Mandarin, and I try to get an answer to that. It says this means the origin of brightness of the source of light. So let me move on to the journey of learning. The Lotus Sutra, which is actually the foundation of Tzu Chi's practice. And I don't know much really about the Lotus Sutra because I don't read a lot about all the various sutras. But I just want to share with you another encounter on the 26th of October, 2019. This was during the commissioning retreat. And again, you know, I'm a very inquisitive person. I was looking for answers. And there were some questions since I joined Tzu Chi from the time of when I got to know more and more about what Tzu Chi does. And there are a lot of activities that I see in Tzu Chi. But I was just beginning to wonder why there was so much focus on voluntarism and little emphasis on the Dharma. Now, obviously, when I was doing the commissioning, I see in the morning Dharma, Master Cheng said, the Dharma in Tzu Chi is the practice in activities in accord with the Lotus Sutra. So therefore, on that day, on the commissioning day, that was in 26th of October last year, strangely, Master gave me the answer, not to me personally, but to say that to everybody, answered that particular question in 2 parts. Now, in the morning, Dharma at dawn, the Master said another day, it was not that she did not share the Dharma in the past. She explained that the Tzu Chi path was founded based on the teachings of Lotus Sutra. So therefore, it's clear to me, based on my contemplation, the activities were the Dharma in practice. Now, in the late morning, the second part of the answer is, Master Cheng came for the certification of the commissioners in the ceremony. In her speech, she said that knowing the Dharma and not in practice does not turn the view of Dharma. So it was very clear that she emphasized on the practice of activities. Let me move on to the other part, which is the journey of learning in Tzu Chi. It's what I call life becomings. So life becoming, every one of us have our own becoming, have events in our life. And there are a lot of life experiences being shared by the various brothers and sisters in Tzu Chi. And they have been awakened by the various Tzu Chi activities, whether it's recycling, disaster relief, or simply the love of the Tzu Chi family. Now, these are lessons of karmic unfoldment in their lives. You know, when we suffer the pains in our life, and the worst thing is that you suffer the pain in vain. And it means you don't learn from it. But every one of us has our own different karmic blueprint when it comes to this life. So what's important is to understand the purpose in this life so that you can engage in a meaningful practice to be able to learn and to grow from there. Now, in the Tzu Chi family, when I was trying to prepare the notes for this, and I've been traveling the past 1 week actually, and I hardly any sleep the past 1 week. And so I thought about Tzu Chi family. What would I describe it? I think there are 4 S's for that. First of all, it's support, sharing, symmetry, and selflessness. Obviously, in the Tzu Chi family, it's support for each other, a sharing of experiences and learnings. And there's a symmetry of practice because we are in one particular practice. And because we are in the Bodhisattva path, it brings up the selflessness of giving in all of us. Now, moving on in the Dharma in activities. So for the past 2 years, been involved in various kind of activities. And now those activities that I did, and I thought I would share with you what I learned from those activities and how that relate to the Dharma in practice. Now, I was involved in cleaning the wounds during home visits. So when I do that, what am I cleaning? Am I just cleaning? Am I just treating those who need help? Actually, I'm cleaning away my obscuration and an incrustation of my own mind. Recycling. So when I recycle, what is it that I would do in my own consciousness? Is transformation of unwholesomeness to wholesomeness. Refugees, the UNHCR project that we help. But in my own consciousness, I'm dissolving hatred with love. The leprosarium, which is the lepers that we visit. So what is it that I would relate to when I visit the lepers? Is to purify my body, speech, and mind. The Spastic Center. Obviously, when I visited the Spastic Center when I was in the UK, and I had very little of the Dhamma at that point in time. I'm not saying that I know a lot now, but I know a little bit more. Is when I visited the Spastic Center here in Kuala Lumpur Baru, it straightened my deformed views and prejudice, and these are the turbidities within me. We're involved with fundraising, both from the public and for the international school, and this is really character building of humility. So all this that I involved with, and all the people that I encounter with, whether they are poor, whether they're wounded, whatever help that they need, they are all my spiritual benefactors. So let me move on to the heart and the mind. Obviously, when we practice, when we cultivate, is it the heart that we're practicing, or is it the mind? And obviously, the purpose why we take up a practice like this is we want to be enlightened. So is enlightenment through the heart or through the mind? And that was basically the question that I was trying to ask, and how the Dharma activities can relate to the wisdom of the mind. So there's one very simple practice, obviously, that the Buddha gave, and there's only 3 lines that he said. He says, stop doing evil, do only good, purify the mind. So obviously, doing good is not good enough. You need to purify your mind, and that's the whole basis of the cultivation. Now, in the manifestation of the heart, obviously, a lot of activities that we do in searching is to bring out that great loving heart or ta'ai sin within us. And the reason is I think that it's very difficult to purify the mind without, first of all, purifying the mind, to bring the manifestation of the great loving heart out from within you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my next slide. The third point I want to talk about is from having the manifestation of the heart is how do you gain wisdom learning. And this is my sharing with you is based on my experience. We can learn the Dhamma from seeing, from hearing, from experiencing. Seeing the books we read, hearing from the Dhamma that we listen to, then we experience that in life, and what I call the life becomings in all of us. But beyond that, we need to do our own contemplation, because seeing is not good enough, hearing is not good enough, experiencing is not good enough. You've got to do your own quiet sitting and contemplate. It's only through contemplation that your realization can come about. And from the realization that you get what I call the inner knowing within you. And then so when you have the inner knowing within you, when you serve in the activities, you serve in the know. And you know what you serve. And when you do that, and as you move on, and you go to higher level of wisdom learning, and as being able to forgive. Because when you are able to forgive, you can penetrate through your mind, through your heart, and you let go of everything. It's very difficult for anyone to let go of anything in life. The fourth point I just want to say is about the intrinsic mind. Obviously, our mind is the doorway of enlightenment, and that's just what the mind is. But the problem is with the mind is that we got a monkey mind. So how can you tame a monkey mind? The only way you can tame a monkey mind is, first of all, you tame the heart. Because the heart is filled with desire, and our mind is filled with ego. So we got the desire in our heart, we got the emotion in our mind. So, but the heart is if the heart by nature can be good, and our mind by nature can be pure. But because of our past afflictions that we have in this life, we need to understand the purpose is to get rid of those afflictions, and we can do that by having a good heart. And that's what the Lotus Sutra has been teaching us, and what Tzu Chi's path is all about. So let me move on to how would I see how to progress in the path. I put down 4 points. First, to know, to understand, to realize, and to practice. You see, knowing is about you can read and you can listen. Reading and listening, you're listening to the worldly words. And that knowing is the process of the intellectual mind. But when it comes to the Dharma, Dharma is about the truth. Now, words are creation of a form of communication for worldly beings. My question to you is, how can worldly words describe the truth when the truth does not even exist in the world? So therefore, there are no worldly words that describe the Dharma. So if that's the case, how can then we realize or understand the truth? And that's what the Buddha has been trying to do. So unless we delve to the profundity of the Dhamma, it's very difficult to understand the truth. So that's the knowing part of it. Understanding, we can go through how we understand it through the experience. And again, understanding is the process of the intellectual and the analytical thinking. And again, it's the mind. So with the mind, you can know, you can understand. But if you want to go on realization, you've got to go to the higher level of consciousness, beyond the consciousness of the mind. And it's through the elevation of your consciousness that you can gain the inner knowing. And that is can only come about when you're able to still your mind, to able to realize what you read and what you listen to. Now, more importantly, and what the master said during the commissioning day when he mentioned this, to say, you can understand the Dharma, but if you don't practice, you can't be turning the wheel of Dharma. And the fourth point that I want to talk about is practicing. Okay? Because you need to, what is it that you are practicing? You are practicing the realization of what you have learned. And it's through serving and live the life of a spiritual aspirant. And you want to practice. So, you see, an awakened one knows one was in a dream. A knowing one knows why the day has to be lived. An understanding one knows what the day has been in store for. But a practitioner knows how the day should be lived. So let me, I know I have a time limitation here. So let me go on to my last slide. The journey of, we are on the journey of self-discovery. The journey of self-discovery is to know the self in you, Understand the self in the self. I use the word capital S in there. And the third point is realize the non-self in the self and practice the true self in the non-self. Now, know the self in you is, you see, we need to know ourselves. Unless you know yourself, you cannot change. And that is the self-discovery that you need to go through. How do you discover yourself? Do a self-analysis. Nobody can tell you who you are. Because unless you analyze your own self and you know your own self, then only you can correct yourself. A lot of us, someone can tell me who I am, but I will not accept it. It's only from your own self-analysis that you can have self-acceptance. Now, understand the self in the self. Now, live the purposeful life, because if you understand the self in the self, then you know what is the purpose of your life, of this life. So you do, you'll be awakened, stop doing evil. Realize the non-self in the self. When you realize the non-self is when you do, you realize that others are more important than you, or if not, at least as important as you do, as you are. Then you can do only good. Now practice the true self in the non-self. Intrinsically, we have a Buddha nature within us, and that's our own true self. And we can only attain that if we purify the mind with wisdom learning. Serving is the doorway of learning, and learning is the doorway of knowing. Knowing is the doorway of understanding, and understanding is the doorway of realizing. And realizing is the doorway of practicing. Now, love and serve all to enter the doors of self-growth that will make lovelier the love in your heart and brighter in the light in your mind. It will make lovely and brighter the lives of others. We are in all this journey and in this lifetime, and that for me, I think the transformation of our own character. Unless we change our own character, because our own character are a finish of the past. So unless we change our own character, we cannot be progressing in this life. So, and that is described, how our character is described by our body, speech, and mind. So as I end this talk, let me just share with you with one a line that I have. It says, as a spiritual practitioner, your words are the echoes of your heart, of your thoughts, and your deeds are the fingerprints of your practice. So thank you very much.
Brother Ching, very wonderful sharing. Because of time constraint, we will arrange another session for Sister 16. Okay, over to Brother Joe.
Okay. Hi, good morning, and auspicious greeting to everyone. Thanks for Brother Chin, who gave us a sharing regarding her journey before he joined Tzu Chi and after, and what the insight that he gained from attending all the Tzu Chi activities, and especially for listening to Dharma Master's teaching, and and what he have learned. And I think the important thing is like just what I think maybe it's time for me, like I came late for this sharing, but I think it's just a time for me to do the closing speech before we end up for this section. And I think like for what I heard just now, the last part for Brother Joe, who gave us regarding what is the enlightened one in the universe, and what is the principle and what it wants to bring us. I think it's just like we turn from the emptiness to have an object. I think just like what Brother Chin mentioned just now, it's like for a personal, after you get through all these experiences in Tzu Chi and your personal understanding and for knowing or realizing, this is the process that you personally get improved for what you have doing in Tzu Chi. So the important thing is like Master's teaching us for our personal 个人思想. So it's like once the more you join Tzu Chi and the more you realizing you are the one, very tiny. 个人 is just like we have to be in a group, not a personal. So this is like the more you're realizing is like we are relying on other people, not for ourselves. So this is the best way for us to cultivate, to minimize ourselves and be humble, and to get cooperate with a big group. So to make it a better world. And this is I think maybe the feedback for me regarding Brother Chin sharing. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, that would be all for today. Thank you.
感恩师父黄师父，感恩 Brother Joe Huang，感恩 Brother Chin for today's such wonderful sharing. Well, Brother Chin is truly humble. He always tells me that he doesn't know much, but he's really I'm still contemplating on brothers sharing. 感恩 all the brothers and sisters for your great support and the presence. Hope that each of us could sustain the Dharma joy and take in another piece of Dharma Master and Hualien love to our life. Let us please make 3 bows to the Buddha and Dharma Master as we depart to apply these teachings in our daily life. Let us pay our respects to our teachers of life universal truth. All together, first bow. Second bow. Third bow. And a bow to our beloved Huang Sifu for such wonderful sharing. 感恩 everyone. See everyone next week. 感恩看到你们。
Okay, please master.
黄师傅。
对的，对的。拜拜。